What's going on, everybody? This is a long requested video about all-encompassing topics regarding shoulder health, shoulder mobility, working around injuries, how to avoid injuries, and really how to maximize just building really good, strong, functional shoulders using, in my opinion, one of the best devices that's possible, that's out there that can do that, which is a total gym or a sliding bench trainer. Now, I can't answer every specific question in detail because I get a wide variety of questions, from how to work around torn rotator cuffs, how to build strong rotator cuffs, or building strong shoulders and just working around certain specific injuries. And it's really hard to do that. So I want to make a really concise video that I think really encompasses all my general tips on why this machine is so awesome, what are some exercises you guys can do, what are some exercises I personally would avoid, and just good overall general tips that'll help you guys in regardless of any situation, not just in the shoulders, but I'd say in other extremities as well. So before I get into this video, guys, please consider liking and subscribing, sharing this content. I'll put links in the description box for everything covered and discussed in this video. I'll also put some timestamps down below if you guys want to jump around to certain sections. All right, now one of the first ways injuries occur, and this is across the board, not just in the total gym, really any device that's out there, is one, either underuse or overuse of the shoulder. So underuse in the sense that you're not doing any exercise whatsoever, then all of a sudden you pick up a physical activity or resistance training, and then boom, you hurt your shoulders and you accuse that particular thing when really your body just wasn't accustomed to it. Two is just doing too much, so overuse, really repetitive things, so like repetitive aerobic things. It could be like swimming, racquetball, tennis. It could be heavy weight training or too much weight training, not allowing enough recovery, or doing too much weight too soon. On a related note is just lack of range of motion for the given task. So we're just adapting to our bodies what we're kind of placing upon it. And then if you pick up a particular new activity or new range of motion or thing you're doing, you don't have that proper range of motion, that's also going to cause some stress and injury. And a part of more fancy word to that is also something called scapular dyskinesis. So if you think of the shoulder, there's all these things kind of fusing together. The shoulders, if working properly, you know, your strength, tendons, ligaments, and your muscles all together have to work together for proper form and function to avoid injury and pain. So looking at the scapular muscle, the scapular bone in the back of your back, this is meant to kind of be freely to move around. So scapular dyskinesis essentially kind of means what it sounds. It's basically lack of movement, you know, kinesis, movement, dyskinesis, a distortion in that. So a distortion in movement in the scapular. So when you watch someone do a row or press, or really anything in the shoulder, we should see that the scapula essentially move around nice and flexibly and pliably. So that's something else to kind of watch out for. And also that kind of go along with the second point, which is proper form and function of a given activity or muscle. Just like anything else in life, you know, there's a certain proper way of doing things. I should say an ideal form. There's not right and wrong particular movements, but there's an ideal form. So trying to find ideal form and function in a given exercise is also vitally important. Another very important point is just lack of strength in your shoulders. So this is something across the board that, yes, you want range of motion, you don't want to overuse or underuse, but you also want the shoulder to be strong enough. So if the shoulder is strong, or you don't have enough strength for the given task, then an injury can also occur. So once you kind of got that out of the way, if we want to improve and build healthy shoulders, we essentially just do the opposite of everything we just said and to keep that in the back of our heads. So instead of overusing and underusing our shoulders, now we want to focus on doing just the right amount of exercise and stress the muscles to keep them fresh and open for new experiences and new movements. If lack of strength can be an issue, we also then want to build strength. So just not neglecting your shoulders, doing some resistance training, generally some kind of free compound related resistance, not like water type resistance, and that's where a total gym can be that great solution. And a total gym is ideal for this situation, I'd say. If neglecting and not paying attention to form is an issue, then definitely paying attention to form and proper movement is also going to be very important when you're moving any of your limbs, or I should say your arms in this case, in any exercise. And then coupled with that is finding unique ways to progress or increase and just maintain proper range of motion in the shoulders. With all those things out of the way, let's jump into the exercises and movements and things to kind of keep in mind as you're working on a total gym. All right, guys, so bear with me in all these different kind of bullet points, because before I get into the exercises, I had to stress a couple very important points. The very first point, and probably the most obvious point that I see people break all the time, is to avoid pain and discomfort. Seems like, again, pretty logical, but people see certain exercises they're quote unquote supposed to do with proper form, their body might not be ready for it. So your body 9 times out of 10 before an injury is going to occur is going to give you some warning signs. So what's great about a total gym is that you can dissipate the weight with your feet in the ground. You can work certain different ranges of motion. There's certain angles and stuff. But if you see me getting in a position like this and I'm doing a frontal raise, which we all at some point should be capable of doing, but based on your state in life and where you're at, you might not be ready for that. It's causing you some discomfort. So anything that feels kind of off or kind of tweaky type feel, avoid that completely and just kind of reduce the weight, reduce the intensity, and kind of go from there and work your way up and progress. Now this next point might be more of like a hot take. This is kind of my personal perception, and as I didn't say this in the beginning, you know, not that it means anything. I could hurt my shoulder tomorrow or today, but of all my years working with heavy weight training and stuff like that, I've always been very mindful and careful of my shoulders, never had any kind of a shoulder injury. And I think because I think of these things, and one of them is working through lines. I never heard anyone really talk about this, but what I mean is stick to those basic, you know, straight line actions, frontal raises, rear delt flies or horizontal abduction movements, lateral raises, overhead presses. They're all working kind of like straight linear lines versus, you know, your shoulder can do things like circumduction, kind of torquing type twisting movements. But 9 times out of 10, especially when you start adding resistance to that, that can be a problem. So I start seeing people that have like shoulder problems and they're doing these nuanced type things. I shouldn't say nuanced, but even like external rotation exercises. Even with that, I don't like people using a lot of heavy weight, which I'll get to like weight in a second, but there's a reason, maybe it's the natural evolution of bodybuilding. You don't see people doing circumduction exercise with weights, maybe because obviously it kind of feels awkward. But my point is working with your shoulder, you know, sometimes the basic simple stuff is the best. Don't feel like, well, if I'm not working in this range of motion, it's just not gonna build my shoulders in that way. That's wrong. If you build strength in your shoulders and then you go back to your sport or application, like it's throwing as a pitcher or, you know, swinging a racket or something, or swinging a racket or bat, whatever, that strength's gonna transfer. So don't think you have to be so literal, because 9 times out of 10, that's not a natural thing to do, and I kind of would avoid that. So think about training in straight lines with your shoulder. A big favorite in rehabilitation world is doing things like rotator cuff, stuff like this, perhaps even something like this, okay? I'm really not saying these are necessarily really bad things. I just find that for a lot of people, they are grossly misused and 9 times out of 10 maybe unnecessary, especially if you don't necessarily even have any specific injuries and if you don't even know why you're necessarily doing them. So I find people think they know rotator cuffs, this will help work the rotator cuff. Maybe they went to a physical therapy session years ago, and long story short, they start putting on a lot of weight on doing this, or they just keep doing it over and over and over again and they don't necessarily need to do it. And they kind of, like, my point is, 9 times out of 10, you don't want to, these are kind of vulnerable muscles. They're easy to kind of just overwork and cause injury. So don't crank the weight up. I often find they're even done improperly. That's a whole nother thing. I think the Total Gym is great for those things. And that's where it can be used really great in rehabilitation, especially if you got like, you know, the swivel thing's great too. Versus like resistance bands, you don't get constant tension. You can't manipulate the weight as much. I can't do things like I'm sitting on here and dissipate the weight this way. So I think those things are great. I just 9 times out of 10 would avoid them for most people. I think you can build and you will strengthen your rotator cuff muscle by doing some of the basic simple exercises and doing them with proper form and kind of mindfulness. And what I mean by that goes back to form. Never just do an exercise blindly without any thought whatsoever. Whenever you're doing an exercise, consciously think about the shoulder doing that motion versus other arms and other things kind of helping out. And if you have problems doing that, usually 9 times out of 10, it's just lowering the weight down. So try and do exercises where you can really consciously think about what's really happening and on the shoulder itself doing most of that work. If it's not, if you feel like you're kind of cheating, then definitely lower that weight. All right, then this leads to the next point, which is basically just don't use too much weight. I'll get to the rep ranges probably towards the end, but if we're doing things that are too heavy, we're gonna be kind of using those external muscles, or other, I should say, auxiliary muscles to kind of help turn on and help them the exercise in the first place, but especially with the shoulder. 9 times out of 10, it's better to go too light than too hard, especially things like a rear delt fly. You can go super heavy if you want to, but I'm on a higher than normal setting. Even on this Total Gym G1, I'd probably put it like number 2, even could put it at number 1 if I wanted to, but especially with things where it's kind of more vulnerable. You know, doing things with a lighter weight that gets you to a rep range of maybe 10 to 15 are gonna be better than doing super heavy stuff. The things I would, first off, avoid doing is kind of any kind of a ripping exercise. If there's any time I felt like my shoulder was vulnerable on a Total Gym, it's when I start going super fast and super, I would say more super fast and kind of ripping the exercise, like doing that type of thing where you're letting your body kind of jerk and then ripping into the exercise. Especially that can happen with like pullovers too. I start getting really aggressive, especially if it's on like a higher incline and I'm just kind of in the zone doing that. Avoid kind of ripping things. Keep things just kind of nice and fluid, you know, as you do an exercise. That's a really important thing, especially with the shoulders. The other thing is adding some extension is gonna really help your shoulders out. So you guys can see, I don't know if you guys can see it, I got 2 carabiners. I got my special swivel, which I've talked about that. I'll link it down below. Very important to have, especially good for your shoulders. I'd even add these chrome handles. Actually help the integrity of your shoulders and exercises a lot better as well. But I also even got this additional clip here. So I can get a lot more range of motion and not have like I'm gonna bottom out. But let's say I got some extension, I got this rotation here. What I also want to avoid is this kind of, what I mean a compromised position also goes back to working in lines, is someone sitting upright and they want to do something like this. Notice where my shoulder is here. Like, does this necessarily look like it's very comfortable? I could do this, but it has to be pretty lightweight, and it's not likely would be okay, but for a greater, longer period of duration, heavier weight, that's probably gonna cause some problems. So what I would do is lean more into it. So now I'm in a nice straight line, and it's a lot less stress. There's no like torquing on my shoulder. It's not in this vulnerable, what I would say, kind of shoulder impingement position. I could talk about impingement for a while too, but the point is, whenever you're doing anything, kind of resetting the shoulders, you never want to press and do exercises when you're already in this kind of protracted, hunched down position. At the very least, just kind of think about sitting up straight, and that'll also help a lot of your positions as well. So the exercises and ways I would work your shoulders, to kind of sum this up, work them 2 to 3 times, maybe I'd say 2 times a week. Don't overdo it. Keep in mind that anytime you're doing your chest exercise, anytime you're moving your shoulders really, or moving your arms, you're gonna be working your shoulders. So don't overwork them, don't underwork them. I'd say 2 times a week is a sweet spot. If you're doing isolated single joint exercises or isolated shoulder exercises, then I would say, you know, don't do any more than maybe I'd say 3 exercises. I shouldn't say don't, but just avoid doing too much, but maybe like at least doing 2 to 3 exercises. Granted, again, anytime you're pushing, you're doing those exercises as well. Keep the rep range maybe between 10 to 15, so therefore it's gonna be a little bit lower intensity. Don't force out a hard 15 in my opinion. And then maybe 2 to 3 sets would be good as well. As far as the actual specific exercises, I would pick from a variety of just basic, and this is hard because I'm on my knees here, but just frontal raises. Okay, I can do it from here. Lateral raises, I can even do kind of like a modified frontal lateral raise here, but I could do frontal raises just like that. I certainly can lay on my back doing lateral raises just like this, all right? But the main thing I'm doing, even if I'm doing a frontal raise here, everything is set here. I'm not sitting like this and doing that, all right? That's gonna be a recipe for disaster. Before I do anything, shoulders and everything's are kind of reset. I'm focusing, I'm thinking about my shoulders. I'm not forcing any heavy weight. If this is too heavy, like this is even borderline for me, honestly. I'm using my feet, but this is a little bit too much, all right? But things like a rear delt fly, great exercise. I tell people sometimes you gotta find the one that feels natural for you. Which hand's on top? For me, it's the right. But with this swivel, with the chrome handle, with my hands crossed, I get a nice range of motion. This really basically kind of instills that nice scapular, good scapular function, avoiding things like scapular dyskinesis, so paying attention to how my shoulder is moving. If I'm doing any kind of straight shoulder press, you could certainly do it seated if you have some more extension, but the main thing I'm thinking about here is working in my range of motion that works for me as far as how low I have to go, but working as I'm pressing, make sure my biceps are kind of ending up even with my ears, and maybe with a slight shrug at the top. Now you can do that down below too. I should have brought this for this video, but that inverted press on here with any kind of a dip attachment or the press up bars as well, I just recently used in other videos. Excellent, excellent, excellent exercise. If I had to say pick one shoulder exercise that covers all your bases, that would probably be it. I mean, you can't really go wrong with even doing that, assuming you're doing it with good form. And that's the great thing about this machine. It kind of locks you in more or less good form. Yes, you can kind of cheat in pressing up here, but try and think about pressing through a nice straight line through the range of motion that works for you. But that's honestly the biggest tips I would give. And some of you guys might watch this video and be like, well, you didn't really tell me a whole lot. You didn't give me any super special exercises. But the main thing is conceptually what I just said. If you keep everything I said in the back of your head, you do foundational basic exercise, you don't overwork or underwork the exercise, you focus on range of motion, you don't overdo and try anything super nuanced or weird, you will have great shoulders. And if you have bad shoulders, just take everything I said, contemplate, am I doing all these things properly? And then bring it down a couple notches. Without knowing your specific situation, this is the best advice I could give to anyone in a very simplistic take-home package that even though it sounds really simplistic, people have a hard time really following and adhering to. But be mindful of your form, pay attention to your form, and always listen to your body. Your body is going to give you signals before it kind of just destructs on itself. So listen to pain and discomfort and modify accordingly. That's the great thing. Adjust the tower height. Find some extra length so you get more range of motion in the movement. Find a sliding bench trainer that works and fits for you, and don't do exactly what I'm doing. Work your way up, and that's the process. The process is the best point of these machines in the first place. So hopefully this video helpful, informative. Just went longer than I really wanted to, even though I'm covering just some basic stuff and foundational stuff. If you guys want to see other things, if you have any specific questions, let me know. I'll let you guys know about that. I'll see you guys on the next video.